everyone, and welcome to the Plug In Play podcast. I am your host, Henry, and this is your checkpoint for video game news, reviews, and hot takes that nobody asked for. We have an interesting episode yet again for you. We have Nintendo's plans for all of 2026 leaked by that little rascal Nate the Hate. We have Game Pass being a little too expensive. Did you know about that? Have you heard about that? Well, Asha Sharma actually agrees. We'll talk about that, and Disney wanting to acquire Epic. You know, the guys who make Fortnite and Unreal Engine. That sounds like a match made in, I don't know. We'll find out in my opinions there. And we have for impressions Shadow X Sonic Generations. A classic, some would say. I really enjoy Sonic Generations, but what do I think about Shadow Generations? We'll get into that. But before we roll into the news, we have housekeeping. So, if you perchance have not given us a follow on any of your podcast services, we would love for you to do that. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict, we're on things I don't even know what they are, but we're on them. And you can give us a follow, you can give us a rating, you can give us a like, comment, subscribe, and you can do all those things on our Twitter or X, whatever you prefer, our TikTok, our Instagram, our YouTube, all under Plug In Play Pod 1. You can even write a comment. We'll read it out on the show. We love interaction. We love conversation. It's why we do this. You can even send us an email if you're feeling shy. You don't want all the other people in the comment section to blow you up. You can send me an email at pluginplaypodcast1@gmail.com. I will read it out on the show. I will read it with vigor, with passion. And guess what else is down in the description for you waiting? It's timestamps. That's right. They're a labor of love. I do it for you. If you don't like something I'm saying, you can skip past it. If you really are just dying to hear me say something specific, you can jump directly to it. And that is all of the housekeeping that we have. Thank you for sticking around through that. I know you love to be preached to, advertised to. Who doesn't, really? Especially when it's from me, such a charming rascal. Of course you enjoy my housekeeping. So here we are. All right. What's going on? A little bit of a friendly banter, right, before we move into things. It's been really busy around here. News has been really light in video games. I genuinely started looking into the news for this week, and I was like, wow, there really hasn't been anything. The Nintendo leaks, hey, man, I am so far behind on that. That literally dropped the day I was recording my last episode. I think it dropped during the recording. And so I had finished recording, and I looked at the news and was like, oh, monumental news. Cool. I guess I'll talk about that in 2 weeks when nobody cares about it anymore. But here we are. I'll eventually get around to that. Been working outside a lot. Haven't had a lot of times for games in general. Also, my brain is quite possibly fried like an egg. It's finally starting to get hot again, at least here in the South. And that means when you're redoing a deck, you probably are going to be dehydrated and sunburned and want to die. And that's kind of where I have been the past few days. The fact that I'm even stringing together sentences correctly, I'm pretty proud of myself. But I think that's enough. Okay, are you just sick of hearing me yap about things that aren't video games? I know I am. All right, so we'll roll into what is increasingly becoming one of my favorite things because we actually have interaction on social media now. Weirdly. So this is the comment corner. We're rolling. Officially, this is the comment corner section of the podcast, the segment, some would say. It's been really active on social media recently. I switched it up, took out all my AI personas, as I'm sure you're sick of hearing me talk about on this podcast. But we've finally just negated it all, just gone straight to gameplay. And the algorithm, at least on Instagram, has really taken to me. YouTube doesn't give a frick. YouTube used to be my go-to platform. It was the only platform that was pushing me at all. And now YouTube refuses to do anything with my videos. It's 0 views for all of them. So it's so weird how it's completely flip-flopped. TikTok has pretty much killed me as well, but Instagram has completely, absolutely taken up the ship. It is thousands of views every post. Not only thousands of views every post, but very good interaction. My most interacted post, funny enough, was a Days Gone post from 2 weeks ago. Hundreds of likes, thousands of views. I was very surprised by its engagement, and that continues to be a very um, consistent thing of the inconsistency of the algorithm. I have no idea what is going to do well, or because it was a Days Gone post, which if you're not familiar, Days Gone is a zombie video game from Sony, from PlayStation, that did not really do very well critically, but sold very, very well, and to a point where Sony just killed the franchise because reception wasn't that strong, even though sales were through the roof. Doesn't make any sense to me how businesses work sometimes. Normally they want the money, right? But in this case, they basically killed the franchise. And I don't necessarily ever hear people talk very positively about it. It's mostly people just saying, "Oh, it's fine." But oh my gosh, the love I was seeing for Days Gone on a clip that wasn't even exclusively about Days Gone. It was specifically about Days Gone being the best selling Sony IP on PC when they ported games to PC, which I had a couple people kind of going back and forth with me on that, and I totally understand why. They were like, Days Gone is definitely not the best game ever selling wise on PC for Sony. And it's like, oh yeah, well, Helldivers too. Yeah, that makes sense. Technically, I was specifically referring to games that were ported. Helldivers 2 was never ported to PC. It was developed for PC initially and was released at the same time. So that's kind of what I meant when I was saying that. So I was wrong. I'm not going to title the episode "I was wrong" again, because I wasn't that wrong. My intention was always pure. Okay, but anyways, that clip blew up. But I've had a lot of comments that aren't telling me to kill myself, which is amazing. I don't need that. I really, really don't need that for people to tell me to kill myself. It's really unnecessary, and it doesn't make me feel any better about myself when people say that. So it's nice to have people not telling me to kill myself. Instead, they're actually commenting. I saw there was a group of people who had like a comment thread in one of my videos. They were like talking with each other. I was like, this is amazing. I was like, I can't believe this. People are using my video to like discuss and have conversations around video games. It wasn't a very interesting conversation. Sorry to throw you guys out there like that. But it was, so I didn't feel the need to jump in, but I thought that was so awesome. Like I was part of that process of the communication, the the dialogue behind video games. And I was like, heck yeah, dude. Like this is what it's all about. We're almost building a community here. I don't have anywhere near enough followers or consistent commenters to have a community, quote unquote, but it is still really cool to even see that happening. So now that I've rambled and almost kind of, you know, inflated my ego almost a little bit there, I am willing to turn it over to a viewer. In this case, it is on Instagram, which is where all of our new content is tending to explode in popularity. It's from snee.biz. And this is from the video I made on the Switch 2 not meeting sales expectations by Nintendo. He says, the thing is, a lot of people are acting like the idea of a next generation console is some foreign taboo concept. They say stuff like, quote, my Switch works fine. I don't need a Switch 2. When the Switch 2 is not only where all the new games will be going, but it runs worlds better than the Switch 1 and feels like a vast improvement. They jump on the, quote, it's just greed bandwagon and feel like they're entitled to every new game releasing on both systems. The Switch one had a long life cycle, and it's time to upgrade. So, in this video that he's referencing, or that he's commenting on, I more or less said, yeah, I think people are acting strange about the Switch 2 in a way that I don't fully understand, right? So I see a lot of comments saying I see no reason to get a Switch 2. The software has not been doing what I want. There's not a good reason to pick one up. And I'm still kind of satisfied with my Switch 1. Here's the thing. I genuinely agree with Snee.biz. I do. I think that people complaining about the Switch 1 or Switch 2 and saying, hey, I don't feel a need to move over, I don't understand that. I think that there's plenty of software already that is honestly a decent reason to pick up the console. Not only that, but like that Nintendo, who if you're getting a Switch 2 at all, or even a Switch, you're really only picking that up just to play Nintendo games. Like you're not playing third-party games on Nintendo hardware because typically the hardware isn't good enough to maintain, a good frame rate and performance for something like a Call of Duty. So, and that's of course, one of the best-selling games every year. So most players statistically are going to be wanting to play that game, right? But you can't do that on Nintendo hardware. You really are buying in Nintendo hardware for primarily like smaller indie games is kind of have made their home on the Switch and the Switch 2 and Nintendo hardware or software, excuse me. If you don't have those, what are you doing, right? So if you're saying, oh well, I only care about the games that I have on my Switch, I get so this is where it kind of comes back around, right? Is obviously there is nothing objectively wrong with sticking with a Switch 1. Just like there's nothing objectively wrong with somebody sticking with a PlayStation 4. There's still a large percentage of the gaming population on the PlayStation platform that is exclusively on PlayStation 4. And they're not really even releasing games anymore for that. People are mainly just watching Netflix and playing Fortnite on it. And they're playing obviously a vastly inferior version of Fortnite because the PlayStation 4 is nowhere near as powerful as the PlayStation 5, and therefore you're probably playing with lessened textures and possibly a poorer frame rate. I haven't really checked the specs on that, but like in general, that's what those players are playing. So everybody's going to play what they want to play, and if only the games that you care about are on the Switch 1, then that's all you need to play. That you don't need a Switch 2, right? That's objective fact. But also, if you are thinking about anything other than just like I'm happy with playing a decade-old game forever, then obviously you need to switch over to the Switch 2. I think it's weird for people to be like, oh no, I'm still happy with the Switch 1. Do we not remember the conversations that we were having before the Switch 2 came out? The Switch 1 was literally nicknamed in the gaming community the Stinky Switch. And I think that it's genuinely a solid nickname for it. If you go back and think, and I had to honestly think about it for a minute, because honestly, most things on the PlayStation 4, I feel like I'm probably okay with playing. But like Switch 1 was trying to run basically Switch 2 hardware or software. I keep saying the freaking words wrong. I'm sorry, they both end with where. They were trying to run Switch 2 software on the Switch 1. And it was like Pokemon. Like the newest, I think it was Scarlet and Violet. Scarlet and Violet was trying to be run on the Switch 1, and it clearly was a game that should have been on the Switch 2, and they later had a Switch 2 patch, and it basically fixed everything. You had a freaking windmill that looked like a gosh darn slideshow. It was horrific. But like that was because they were really trying to push the Switch 1's life cycle and software that should not have been running on it on that particular device. It was in absolute desperation for an upgrade. The Switch 1 was a handheld console that is a decade old. Like, you have to upgrade it at some point, or you will be playing horrific games. And I'm not even a performance snob. I genuinely am not. If a game runs decently, I really do not give a frick. It can look way worse than like a photorealistic game that you get on like a PlayStation or something like that. I don't care. but like even I was looking at the Switch 1 and I was like, this is really bad. This is a lot of the games, first party games that were coming from Nintendo were horrible. So it's weird to see people be so middling on the Switch 2's reception at this point because software is not where it needs to be in terms of offerings. But I also think that Donkey Kong Bonanza and Pokemon Pocapia and a million other games that are on the horizon for this thing, which we're going to actually be getting into in the news very shortly, give a very good, even without thinking about what's coming in the future. I genuinely think that there's enough on the console right now to be pretty happy with. Like, I think back to the PlayStation 5 launch, and I'm like, what did we really have? The Demon Souls remake, Ratchet and Clank, and like that was it. Not only was that it, but that was all we really got in terms of first party offerings for years. That was exclusive to the PlayStation 5. Some games like God of War were like on both PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 4, but like in terms of exclusivity, yeah, that's all you really had. So I think what we're seeing now for the Switch 2 is actually a really good lineup, and not only is it a good lineup, it's consistent. It's constantly adding more and more titles. So, I mean, if you haven't gotten Got yet, you're gonna at some point. If you genuinely consider yourself a Nintendo fan that you want to have, if you have a Switch 1 and enjoyed it, I would assume you're eventually going to have to get over to the Switch 2. And you probably want to do that now before its price gets hiked because there have already been reports that that is going to happen. Just happened to PlayStation, happened to Xbox, probably is going to happen to Xbox again. And Nintendo is going to follow suit. So you get a Switch 2 now. Are you feeling like it? Do you think you might? Maybe someday down the road? Well, you should do it now. So it's weird for people to kind of be going back and forth on this and act like the Switch 2 isn't that compelling of a prospect, even though you really should not be happy with your Switch 1 anymore, unless you're just playing Super Mario Odyssey like over and over and over and over again. And you really should be looking at the Switch 2's portfolio in terms of software and saying, yeah, there's probably something here for me. So I don't know. It is an interesting situation that we're finding ourselves in terms of the reception of Switch 2 that I don't even fully understand. So it is what it is. But I guess getting to the root of where I found this to be an interesting discussion is it wrong for people to do that? No. But do I understand it? And I like to think I give people a pretty good benefit of the doubt in a lot of like different ways in terms of a lot of gaming conversations. And if there's an objective reason for people to be doing something, I'm typically like, yeah, let them freaking do it. It's not hurting anybody. But I just see a lot of complaints, and I'm like, I don't understand your logic, really. Like, I don't see a good reason for you to want to stay with the Switch 1. You should be wanting to jump ship, like as soon as humanly possible from that thing, either for the prospect of new games, the performance of the software, or for the fact that you're honestly probably going to have to pay more the longer you wait. So I don't know. It is odd to see even hardcore gamers being like, yeah, I don't really feel the need to pick up a Switch 2 right now. It's like, okay, you are entitled to your opinion, please, but it just doesn't make any sense to me, and no matter how I slice it. So that is our comment corner. We appreciate you, Mr. Snee.biz, and we appreciate anyone else who comments in our YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, whatever the heck you want to do, you can do it. I don't mind. I love all commenters equally. So moving on to the news. This is my second favorite segment behind you because you're my lovely viewers. We'll start it off with our 2-week-old news. Hot off the presses, right? Nintendo, all of their 2026 plans have been leaked by that rascal, Nate the Hate. Well, what has he delivered to us in terms of news? Nate the Hate is a video game insider. He is a big leaker. For a lot of the he's really popped off recently in terms of the leaks that he's been providing. It's typically something that you hear from like a Jeff Grubb or a Jason Schreier over at Bloomberg News. Those are typically the two big leakers that I see kind of all over the place. Jason Schreier is kind of considered like the definitive de facto 100% reliable source, and everybody else is just kind of all over the place with their particulars in terms of accuracy. But Nate the Hate has really been dropping a lot of big rumors lately, a lot of big leaks, and this is by far the biggest. Not only did he drop all of Nintendo's 2026 plans very early in the year, only a quarter of the way in, but he was also corroborated pretty much immediately by other much bigger outlets that are reputable news sites. I am citing VGC for my article, which was one of the big sites that most people pointed to and said, oh yeah, like VGC corroborated it. It's like, okay, well then we know all this is happening. So we start off, the first big thing here is Star Fox. Ooh, Star Fox is coming back this summer, as leaked by Nate the Hate, for 2026 summer release. We're going to get a new Star Fox game, and it's going to be a classic Star Fox game. So if you're any old fan of Star Fox, you know there's two kinds of Star Fox games. One is the traditional, like you're in a spaceship and you're just shooting other stuff, right? That's all it is. And then the other is like an adventure game. You're on like a foreign alien planet and you're running around hitting people with like a staff or something like that. It's Star Fox Adventure. So you have to clarify that now. Star Fox Adventure, I never played, but I've always heard mixed things about. I don't think it was a game anybody loved. It's very interesting because when I saw this was a very big fantasy critic thing, which I'll probably get into in a minute. But I went back and I checked all of the reviews for previous Star Fox games. And yeah, sure, the original Star Fox is like a 90 on Metacritic. Very, very well reviewed, very highly loved game. Every other Star Fox game that has really ever come out is kind of okay, if not middling, if not like not even that good. And it's like, okay, well, no wonder everybody's like not really clamoring for a Star Fox game, and the main thing that keeps this game alive is like his Smash Brothers presence, kind of deal. So I don't have any nostalgic connections with Star Fox. I've briefly played it, I think, on the N64 at a friend's house or something like that. But even then, I don't even think I liked it that much as a kid. So I have never really clamored for Star Fox in general. In this, we're hearing the visuals are supposed to be very good, and apparently also has online multiplayer, which scared me a little bit because I don't remember the last game I fully loved the online multiplayer from Nintendo. Like the closest I've ever come to that is Splatoon. I actually did enjoy the multiplayer there, but then like you look at something that should have had awesome multiplayer like Super Smash Brothers being horrific, and it's like, oh well. I don't know if I really trust Nintendo with any online multiplayer. Not only that, but it's likely a dog fighting mode for online multiplayer. And I just can't see myself really getting into that. It's not like I play Ace Combat a lot or anything. So this just, while an interesting leak for sure, that this is Star Fox returning, right? I can't say I'm very interested in it, and I can't say I'm even super confident that this game will be amazing. The fact that it has online multiplayer and it's supposed to be a high budget game, that's where I start saying, okay, if it's a high budget game, Nintendo clearly has some kind of faith in it, but they also have faith in it for another reason, because if you weren't following Hollywood news recently, the Super Mario Galaxy movie recently came out, and Star Fox is a character in that movie. So what that essentially means is Star Fox is probably going to get his own movie, and this is a game that will tie into the IP of Star Fox, kind of helping out the movie helping out the game, so on and so forth. They're trying to, as we say in corporate America, synergize. So they're trying to synergize the Hollywood films alongside the success of the games to help lift both, a rising tide and all that. So that's probably what's happening here, and that's probably why this game exists. So it's not something I'm super happy about. Or excited, not happy. It's like I'm mad at it. I'm not mad. I'm not unhappy. I'm just not excited. I just don't really care about Star Fox. So, but it's very interesting to see that this series that has been dead for so long. The last Star Fox game was a Wii U game that nobody played because nobody played a Wii U, and it was also a platinum game that apparently had one of the worst control schemes known to man. So, not a very good game in general. So that is all from Star Fox. There also was a confirmation that no 3D Mario game will be expected to drop this year, but that it will likely come in 2027. This is not too surprising, I'd say. It's almost surprising to me that this game is actually anywhere near ready, because the studio that made Super Mario Odyssey is the same studio that just released Donkey Kong Bonanza. Now, Nintendo is very well known for kind of having multiple things in the fire at once, having a lot of different games going on in perpetuity. But in this case, you just assume the same team that worked on Odyssey was going to work on Odyssey 2, or just in general, the next 3D Mario game. But in this case, not the case, because obviously 2 years is probably way too short of a time frame for these guys to push out a Mario game that if they just made Donkey Kong Bonanza. So in this case, it may be the same team that worked on Bowser's Fury. It may be a completely separate team that they've built up for this. It makes it a lot more interesting because I don't think it's going to be a carbon copy of Super Mario Odyssey. It won't be a Super Mario Odyssey 2. It'll just be another Super Mario game, which I think is great. It means there's a little bit more variety here, a little bit more intrigue to see what it ultimately ends up being. But a lot of people were actually kind of expecting a 3D Mario, mainly because Super Mario Odyssey, the last 3D Mario game, came out over a decade ago. It was a launch title on the Nintendo Switch 1. So it has been literally an entire generation since we've seen a singular 3D Mario game. So you'd hope that they are very close to pushing one out. Of course, Mario is their flagship IP, their company mascot, probably one of the most well-known video game characters in existence. He's not the number one. In fact, the last I checked, and I have to say last I checked, because last I checked, Resident Evil 6 was the best-selling Resident Evil. Womp womp. But last I checked, Pac-Man is actually the most recognizable video game character in the world. More people can tell you who Pac-Man is than any other video game character. So technically Mario isn't the most well-known video game character in the world, but he's very, very, very well known, and not only that, very, very, very successful. His games are always very popular, and obviously there's now a freaking theme park for this guy, and a very successful movie series now with a second film. So they need more Mario games, is essentially what I'm saying. So it is surprising to see that there's no new Mario game, but there's various reasons for that. But I still think the fact that Nintendo puts out so many different games so frequently, I would have assumed that there would have been another 3D Mario game prior to a decade. So if somebody had asked me when Super Mario Odyssey released, when do you think the next Super Mario Odyssey will come out, or Super Mario 3D game will come out, I would have told you, 5 years tops. And here we are a decade later, and I'm clearly off in that assumption. So it's kind of what it's nice to know that we have one coming next year at the very least. And then finally, in this large lineup of leaks, alliteration is key, we have The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time Remake, which will be expected this year in holiday 2026, which is probably one of the few games that is not afraid of GTA 6 coming out. Most games would very much avoid that time frame for releasing their game. Nintendo, for an Ocarina of Time remake, not so. So this is considered to be a ground-up remake. We still do not know the extent of this remake, exactly what it is yet. Obviously, it hasn't been released yet or announced yet. So, we still don't know that much about it. The details that Nate the Hate gave were kind of all over the place. The reason I kind of give that is because it's been a high speculative point for me as of late. If you aren't familiar, I am an avid fantasy critic player where you basically play fantasy football but with video game review scores in a league. And my league does not accept various forms of remakes for games. If it's something like a remaster, that's not considered eligible for the league, and various components make games a full remaster or just a partial remaster or a remake in general. So recently, or not that recently, but Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time was released again on the Nintendo 3DS. There's a 3D version of the game that was released. It had some tweaks, I think, to it, but not that many. It was pretty much the same game, just with 3D capability. It's actually where I played Ocarina of Time for the first time. I had never played it as a kid, and I got a 3DS pretty late in its life cycle and just picked up a bunch of games for cheap. And Ocarina of Time, I was like, this is a great way to experience it. And 3D, I love 3D on the freaking 3DS. It's so cool. But that platform's dead. They'll never do that again. So anyway, it is like more than that is what I have to assume. I would assume this is a full ground up remake. Kind of an interesting aside, for my league, I bid every year. You have $100 to bid on games, and I bid $35 on Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, which I thought was crazy because we still don't know if this game will even be eligible for the league yet. And somebody beat me out by $1. And we were both way above all the other bids because people were still very speculative of it. But somebody bid $36, and I was like, bro, I hope to God that game is a partial remake and it is not eligible. But yeah, I think it is going to be a full-on remake from the ground up. There is no way, based on most of the reporting I'm seeing and the cooperation, like VGC and stuff like that, it seems to be it's a big budget remake. So it's not going to be just a port. But still, Fantasy Critic can be pretty all over the place on exactly what they consider a partial remake, a full remake, all that good stuff. So you never really know until the fat lady sings on that one. But Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time remake is awesome. Obviously, a lot of people consider it to be one of the greatest Zelda games, if not the greatest Zelda game of all time. And I don't agree with that. I think it's very dated at this point. And there have been many games that have really outshined it. I actually went back and replayed all of the Legend of Zelda 3D games for the first time, probably about 5 years ago, something like that. And during the pandemic is when I did it. And I was kind of surprised that I liked Twilight Princess the most. Twilight Princess is basically Ocarina of Time, but just more modernized, and that's why I liked it so much. I do think that Ocarina of Time is a great game. It is just archaic in its design. It was obviously one of the first 3D games ever made, and it pioneered a lot of 3D mechanics. Obviously, Z targeting or just in general lock on was something that Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time was pretty well known for. And Twilight Princess is basically just the same formula as Ocarina of Time, just more modern. There's a lot more experience with 3D development that's clearly gone into Twilight Princess, and it's a lot larger of a world and a lot more detailed world, which obviously just comes with more advanced hardware and more experience in development, right? So, I'm a Twilight Princess fan. But I think that if you remake Ocarina of Time and give it the same level of polish and modern, trappings as a Twilight Princess, then I think that you genuinely could have another all-time great Legend of Zelda game. I think it'd be easily the definitive place for you to get in on this kind of a game or try out Zelda for the first time, that kind of deal. So I'm genuinely looking to see how it turns out. how big of a deal it is. Like I said, I only played Ocarina of Time for the first time like 5 years ago, so I'm not really raring to get into Ocarina of Time remake. But depending on how big of a deal it is, like I'll definitely be checking it out and I'll be playing it. But that is all. So that's all that he gave out for these leaks. A very big deal because Nintendo obviously did not want that to happen. It's pretty much been confirmed that this is all accurate. This is all pretty much probably not all the plans that Nintendo has. Actually, really, probably is because they've already announced a new Fire Emblem game. They've already announced a new Splatoon game. And there's there's a handful of other titles there. I think I saw somebody kind of map out what the rest of their quarters look like, and they have a big release every quarter and a couple of small games every quarter based on what we have here. So I mean, this is legitimately what you're probably looking at for all of Nintendo's games for the rest of the year, and we shall see, friend. I think that you have a lot of executives at Nintendo right now that are pissed. This is one of the times that I think leaks is probably a really bad thing. This is a legitimate kind of leak that would hurt a stock price of a company. Like people knowing that 3D Mario is not expected until next year, that genuinely could hurt some investors' confidence in this year's financial gains for Nintendo, and they could pull out. Something like that. Maybe they're expecting a bigger splash than Star Fox or something along those lines. They wanted another Legend of Zelda game that wasn't a remake. Who knows? Like this could legitimately hurt a company. And it kind of harkens back to, well, what is remake culture really? Is remake culture good or not? Is remake culture, is leaking culture good? Are these people leaking these announcements prior to an actual date that was planned? Is it bad? And it used to always be just one game, right? It'd be one game from one studio or something like that, and it'd be like, oh well, you really just ruined the marketing team's efforts, so you really took the wind out of the sails for a team that had worked really hard on this game for 5-10 years, whatever the case is. Hopefully not 10, but 5-6 years, whatever it is. And yeah, that does suck, but like also, hey, they're a reporter. That's their job. They got to do what they got to do, and that's how they make a living, right? So like everybody's just kind of doing what they have to do to get by. But in this case, like I think a leak like this is so monumental. I think if we see another leak from Nintendo anytime soon, I will be shocked because I think they're going to be having this stuff on lockdown. It's going to be like Fort Knox up in Nintendo's PR rooms. People are not going to have any idea what's going on there for a minute because something like this I can see being a really big problem. So I understand why executives would be upset, and I understand that, honestly, if I was Nate the Hate, I feel like you're not going to get this kind of scoop again because, like, you really are just going to make it harder for any information to come out of Nintendo after this. But I mean, also, Nate the Hate's name is now kind of pretty significantly upped in terms of respectability and what people are looking for in terms of leaks and stuff like that. So, I mean, it really probably did benefit him far more than just like doling it out slowly or anything like that. So, anyway, that is the news from 2 weeks ago. What do you know? Have you heard about it? Did that surprise you at all? Well, maybe this will. Next up, Shift Up, the developers of Stellar Blade, acquires Shinji Mikami's new studio, Unbound. The name of the studio being Unbound. You, of course, know Shinji Mikami as the director of Resident Evil and Resident Evil 4. The good ones. Well, some would say that. Some would say Resident Evil 2 is the best Resident Evil. I would say Resident Evil 4 is likely the best Resident Evil. But in this case, his studio has been bought by Shift Up. Shinji Mikami's moved around a little bit. He hasn't directed in a minute. He's been a producer a lot. So he recently moved out of Tango Gameworks right before it was shut down by Microsoft, probably because he left, or at least that was probably a considerable factor to it being shut down. But he helped out with production on Ghostwire Tokyo and Hi-Fi Rush, one of my favorite games of that year, and then left, and then the studio got shut down, and he started up Unbound, which still has not produced anything or put out anything per se. But I find it to be a very interesting arrangement. Not only because obviously Shinji Mikami is a huge name in the gaming industry, but Shift Up, I don't think I really trust Shift Up very much as a producer or a developer of games yet. So I actually did a little bit of research on Shift Up. So last episode, actually, I talked about Stellar Blade, and I found to be Stellar Blade being a well-made game, but a very flawed game in a lot of ways. And more so a game with a high budget. like that's kind of where I felt Stellar Blade fell. Was Stellar Blade was a game with a really high budget, but like only okay game design, and it ended up just kind of feeling like an 8 out of 10. You know, depending on where you caught me playing the game, whether I was either miserable playing it or pretty pleasantly surprised. Like that, there was really only 2 modes to playing Stellar Blade in that way. But anyway, I was like, why would this studio buy Shinji Mikami's new studio? That seems like a really big acquisition for a studio I don't know that much about and seems pretty small. This is also a Korean studio, Shift Up, and Shinji Mikami studio is obviously Tokyo based, so Japanese. So there's a little bit of a culture disconnect there as well. You'd think that normally Japanese studios kind of stick to their own. They don't like to kind of explore being acquired by somebody outside of their own country or working with companies outside of their own country in a lot of cases as well. But in this case, the reasoning that the CEO of Shift Up gave for this is Unbound, or quote, Unbound runs on parallel development, smaller experiential titles alongside a large-scale flagship, so neither ambition nor risk-taking ever get sacrificed to the other. So essentially they're saying we have a business model that says we make a lot of money off of this, and then we hope that we can make, you know, a little bit of money here and there off of other games that are smaller in scale. When I read this, I was not as familiar with Shift Up as I was prior to doing research on them, and I thought the flagship that he was referring to was Stellar Blade. Like that's what I thought he was saying his studio's flagship was, and I was like, look, I know Stellar Blade did pretty all right, but I don't think it did that all right. And so I started doing research, and I was like, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. Shift Up's flagship title is Nikke, so Nikke, which is what produces about 97% of their revenue and has generated about $1 billion as of 2022. So that was, 4 years ago. So it's probably made a good chunk of change more since then. What is Nikke? Well, I vaguely recalled that because there was DLC for Nikke X Stellar Blade in Stellar Blade. So, like, alongside a Nier Automata DLC. So I was like, oh, what the frick is this? And I was like, oh, it's their game. I didn't realize that. I had no clue. Nikke is a free-to-play game. Of course. It's a gacha game. It's I believe, a shooter. It's a sci-fi RPG that's primarily popular in Korea. It has a Japanese and an American audience, but about 60, if not more, percent of the game's audience is in South Korea. So it's a very profitable game that obviously makes them the vast majority of their cash. So I was like, where the frick are they getting the money? Like, they must have some angel investor throwing wads of money at Shinji Mikami to get him to sell his studio to them. Some small studio like this. And I was like, oh, no, they're not that small. Like, they're clearly making plenty of money. They are doing A-okay. So that answered that question very quickly. But I assume they are going to let Shinji Mikami do his own thing. And, Shinji Mikami basically agreed and was like, yeah, I'm going to be making one big game, and then I'm going to be making a couple of smaller games alongside of that. And probably the amount of millions and millions of dollars that they threw in his face to acquire the studio probably also helped in his decision in allowing that acquisition to go through. So, it is what it is. Shinji Mikami, honestly, looking forward to his new game. They kind of teased it at the end of the presentation. And hey, I'm looking forward to see what comes of it just because it's Shinji Mikami. He's a legendary game director, and honestly, he hasn't directed anything in a minute. So I'm very interested to see what comes of it. But just a big deal because it's Shinji Mikami, and that's what's happening with the studio. It's also interesting to just see the powerhouse of South Korean devs kind of moving further into the mainstream gaming space and seeing something like Stellar Blade's developer, or in this case, really Nikki's developer, really seemingly being very successful in trying to grow and expand and have a bigger presence in the overall global gaming market. So that's all I have for that. Next up, Disney is interested in acquiring Epic. What? That's crazy. So, if you aren't familiar, Disney already owns a $1.5 billion stake in Epic. In other words, they already are pretty in bed with each other, to be putting it lightly, most certainly. Epic has also been going through a lot of hard times with layoffs and lower than expected Fortnite engagement. We have talked about this on the podcast in the past few episodes. It very much surprised me that Epic was in any kind of dire straits, considering Fortnite is one of the, if not the most played games on the planet consistently. So it is making a lot of money. So so this was not a de facto thing. It is something that has been reported on. There are some executives in Disney that are for the idea of acquiring the Epic, and there are some that are against the idea. It was something that I didn't fully think was a good fit, especially after I initially heard about this. I was like, certainly this wouldn't be a good idea, right? Disney in general is just, it's the most corporate company you've ever heard of, right? Everybody knows that, Disney's kind of a soulless corporation that puts on the mask of like the most soulful company you've ever heard of, right? But Disney Interactive. So Epic obviously is a video game primary kind of company. They make all their money off of Fortnite. Their business model kind of surrounds Fortnite, and they are also the owners of Unreal Engine, which is a very prominent gaming engine that a lot of people use to develop video games. So they're very much a video game centric focus company, right? Disney has always had kind of an arm and a leg into the video game sphere, but it's never worked out. They've made, Disney Interactive used to be a major part of the company, but games just never really came to fruition. And when they did, they weren't very successful. And so eventually, Disney just started farming out their IP to everybody else. So, like, for instance, Sony getting Marvel's Spider-Man and Wolverine, and then EA getting every Star Wars game ever made, and so on and so forth, right? So they kind of gave up doing it themselves and just kind of told everybody else, yeah, you're better at this kind of stuff, just go handle that for us. So I didn't ever think video games was going to be something that Disney was ever going to really want to get back into or want. But then I saw some analysts talking about it. I'm sourcing VGC, which is referencing another interview from another analyst, and he made some very compelling arguments for the potential of an acquisition of Fortnite or Epic by Disney. So essentially, the first bullet point that I have as a potential bonus for Disney is that they really want a Disney portal, a Disney Plus portal specifically. So right now, obviously, Disney has their Disney Plus subscription, and they want you to be able to basically live and breathe Disney. They want you to go to a one-stop shop for all your Disney needs. So they want there to be a store, they want there to be social media, they want there to be like an interactive world that you can immerse yourself into. And guess what Fortnite already does? literally all of that. You can literally watch movies in Fortnite. There have been movies that have premiered in Fortnite before. You can buy things on the Fortnite shop. Most of what Fortnite is for a lot of players is just a place to hang out. It's a place to kind of chill with your friends and play a game of Fortnite and kind of talk with each other and catch up while you're playing. I use Fortnite as that with a friend all the time. That's what we do. So like, guess what? That and not only that, but they're trying to expand Fortnite into a massive differentiation in a bunch of different things. So it's basically trying to be a Roblox competitor, more or less. And that's exactly what Disney kind of wants. It's kind of a platform that can really do everything. And Fortnite already is. So they basically just turned Fortnite into Disney World, essentially. Not only that, but Epic already has a working relationship / partnership with Disney. They work with them on their theme park attractions, which I wasn't familiar with. I'd like to know exactly which ones they're working on specifically. And they even are already making other games for Disney. Like they specifically are confirmed making a Arc Raiders style game, like an extraction shooter with exclusively Disney characters. I believe they're working on a couple of other games that Disney's contracted out to them already anyways. So they could just be basically the Disney Interactive branch of Disney moving forward, and they'd be the ones making a lot of their games. Not only that, and I said, of course, Unreal Engine, hello, how does that tie in? What does Disney need for Unreal Engine? Well, I'm just a gamer who only has a game-focused, centric mind. That's all I think of. Hello. So I was like, Disney's not going to use Unreal Engine for anything. Well, guess what Unreal Engine is also used for, you big dummy? It's used for freaking movies and TV shows. The Mandalorian was heavily produced under the Unreal Engine. All the CG and stuff you're seeing, that's Unreal Engine. So Disney would be owning that now. So they'd just be using that as their proprietary software to help produce CG for their movies and TV shows. So that's a big deal. So there you go. All of the elements that I was like, well, how the frick are they going to really want that? Like, why would Disney want that? Well, they have literally a need for everything that Epic owns. So it would be a perfect partnership, more or less. The Unreal Engine was one thing that really stumped me. I didn't realize that many people were using it for specifically television production and movie production. I didn't understand that. So again, I only think with my dumb gamer brain. That's all I ever think with. Here's the problem. Problem is Tim Sweeney, the CEO of Epic. What is he not a problem with most of the time, right? So Tim Sweeney has unilateral full say over any deal the company makes. Doesn't matter who has shares or how many shares they have. Tim Sweeney has the final say. If they're ever going to sell the company, Tim Sweeney has to be on board. Tim Sweeney is a billionaire. He's a billionaire several times over. So there is no need for him to sell this company necessarily to make money. He's doing fine. So what does Tim Sweeney really want? And I think I agree with the analyst in this piece, and he says basically, hey, he really wants this company to survive and be a very well-known, established thing for decades and to make a mark and essentially create a legacy, right? And I think that's completely understandable. And I think this would not really go in line with that. I think Epic would kind of be dissolved into Disney in a way, and it would no longer be Epic producing these ideas. It would be Disney producing these ideas. And I think if you ever hear Tim Sweeney talk, it's very obvious that Tim Sweeney has very ambitious ideas for Fortnite and for video games as a medium and for engines and all that crazy stuff. He's very forward thinking. And I don't think Disney is going to really care about the forward thinkingness of the video game industry as much as it would be elevating the Disney brand and synergizing with what Disney is already trying to do. So I think it's a little bit tougher of a sell to get Tim Sweeney on board. I think that's your real big roadblock for this deal. But again, the company is apparently not doing as well as what you'd expect, and I can imagine Disney would write a hefty check for this company. Not only that, but Tim Sweeney is the sole runner of the company. So he has a lot on his plate, and I can imagine him getting a little bit older and him saying, hey, retiring sounds nice, and not having to work on all this bullcrap by myself and taking a break to Cabo or whatever the frick rich people. Where do rich people go? I don't know where rich people. I don't have the money to know where rich people would even consider going, but he would go there and he would just sit around and relax. And maybe that's what he'd want to do, and maybe, just maybe, he would give the reins over to Disney before he did that. Maybe. I don't know. But it's an interesting idea, and it's something I hadn't really considered as a viable possibility. But I see now, after listening to others' perspectives, that it can be done, and it can be a very good fit. So we shall see. Depends how bad off Epic is and how much money Disney wants to throw at them. But right now, it's still up in the air. They're kind of just waiting to be a predatory company and strike when they possibly can get a very good deal. And Epic needs the money, which more and more often seems like could be the case very shortly, based on the news recently at least. Next and finally, Asha Sharma tells employees in an internal memo that Game Pass is too expensive. Did you know that? Have you heard? Game Pass is actually way too expensive. This comes 6 months after Microsoft hiked up the price of Game Pass 50% to $30 a month. Yikes. Just buy the dang games at that point, right? This was a very controversial price increase, and I think the final straw in a lot of people's backs that broke them, if they were metaphorical camels. And essentially, I kind of was really on board with that as well. And by on board, I mean I have been a very big Game Pass, supporter, defender. I think the idea of Game Pass is a very nice one, especially when it was $9.99 a month. Holy frick. What a great value. Fantastic value. $9.99 a month was a no-brainer for Game Pass. At $30, 3 times that value, it's really hard to justify it anymore, especially when sometimes Xbox games that come out on it aren't that great, or it takes a minute for a game from Xbox to come out. Like I'm not paying $30 a month to play Keeper. Like that's not something I'm willing to do when it's already a $15 game. That's not worth it. So I still have a little bit of Game Pass running through because I stocked up on Game Pass subscription cards when it was dirt cheap and only $10 a month or whatever. And so I still have a few months left. But good news for me, I was genuinely going to let my Game Pass subscription lapse. Like when I ran out of subscription, it was just going to be over, and I was just going to buy Microsoft games outright. Like why wouldn't I, right? In this case, Asha Sharma is kind of indicating I won't have to do that. I will probably have an option that is likely affordable. So this price increase happened shortly after Call of Duty was ingested into the Microsoft ecosystem. Obviously, they bought Activision Blizzard in a monumentally expensive acquisition, one of the most expensive acquisitions ever for a singular company. And they felt the need that they needed to increase the price of Game Pass because, hey, we just lost a lot of money. This is the best-selling game every year, and now nobody wants to buy it because it's on Game Pass and they can just get it way cheaper just playing it through Game Pass, right? So in this case, some things that have been thrown around that people that are wandering through the whispers of the gaming conversation are they are thinking about removing Call of Duty from the subscription and giving you a lower tier to play everything else. Just basically have everything minus Call of Duty, which is I don't know how you would price that necessarily because that's one game that comes out one time a year. Why wouldn't you just up your subscription for that 1 month or whatever, however long you want to play Call of Duty? I don't know. But they're considering a subscription without Call of Duty. They're considering a subscription with only Xbox exclusives. They're considering a bundle with a Netflix. They're considering partnering with Netflix as well. As well as apparently many other options that are on the table for potential lower cost options for Game Pass. Here's the thing. Obviously, great. The lower the price, the better. There's no reason for me to argue with that. Not only that, but you know, the more options, the better. As a consumer, lower prices and more options only benefit me. And so I am more than happy with this. And of course, the price was too high. I think everybody agrees the price of X. I even have a friend that is a hardcore, die-hard Xbox fan. Like, he is really like, Xbox is the only platform I really care about. And even he was like, I'm letting it lapse. Like, I cannot justify, even as a hardcore Xbox fan, Xbox Game Pass at $30 a month. It is too much money. And I don't play enough on this subscription because I have a freaking kid now to actually get my money's worth out of it. It's easier for me to just not have to worry about it and buy the games a la carte. And I'm like, honestly, I totally freaking get it. And in this case, what I am most surprised about, obviously total win, giving me multiple options, lower prices, I love it. I would probably just settle for the Xbox Game Pass, like only Xbox exclusives pass, because that's really all I care about. And in all honesty, I don't think that they've had a very great third-party lineup of exclusive day one Game Pass games. Like, the last one I even was remotely interested in was High on Life 2, and that game was considered like okay, and it's like, okay, well, I'll just wait. I'll wait until a deep discount on like PlayStation, and then I can keep all my trophies in one place because I care about that kind of thing, and just call it a day. Like, I don't need to pay more for Game Pass. Like, just give me the exclusives, because they still have some of the best developers in the industry producing games for them on a regular basis that I genuinely would be interested in playing regularly. Obviously, Double Fine and Activision Blizzard and Bethesda and all those guys, right? So like, it's totally worth it to me to pay a much reduced cost for just the Xbox exclusives day one. Absolutely. I would absolutely still get into that. Here's the thing that really surprised me about this. Asha Sharma really strikes me as a company, like, yes man. Like, she was clearly put in to be this person that would listen to Satya Nadella, and obviously she went in there to fix Xbox and try to make it profitable again, but she also is like an Asha Sharma, like, yes man, if I had to guess. She seems to be that way. Phil Spencer never got permission to lower the price of Game Pass. I think that upping it to $30 was something that was required of Phil Spencer. He was not told, hey, like, you should think about upping the price to Game Pass to $30. We just think it would be a good idea for you to do that. So, at your own time, just, raise the price. I think that killed Phil Spencer. I think that was antithetical to his plans for Xbox. And here Asha Sharma is, pretty much immediately after being brought in as the new president of Xbox, saying, we're going to have to lower the price of Xbox. Like, there's no way people are going to pay this. And there's no way the service is going to continue to grow and make more money if we just have it at $30 a month. So the fact that she's immediately kind of turning around and being like, oh, actually, that thing that higher ups said we had to do, I'm going to tell the higher ups we really need to think of another way of doing this because it's not the right way of doing it. So, what that says to me is Asha Sharma is really thinking on her own here. She has way more autonomy and freedom if she's able to pull this price lowering off than I expected. And obviously, Phil Spencer had a lot of rope and he used it to hang himself pretty well. Like, pretty much everything Phil Spencer did not pan out for Xbox. And it's really unfortunate because I believed in a lot of what Phil Spencer did. It just unfortunately did not work out. I see Asha as trying to fix this, and it's just odd to see her doing something that I think was an obvious CEO mandated thing that Phil Spencer was not allowed to do almost immediately after kicking out Phil Spencer. So it's very interesting, and it gives me a lot more faith, honestly, in Asha Sharma for her to immediately say, yeah, we need to lower the price on this. It's way too high. It means she's willing to make a decision that is good for consumers. She's willing to make a decision that is maybe not the most profit driving decision, even though obviously it should be a profit driving decision, because if nobody wants to pay $30 for the subscription and everybody cancels, then of course, like, duh, like that's not going to make you as much money. Of course, it depends how you do the math, obviously. Even if like 50% of Xbox Game Pass subscribers stayed with it at a 30-month subscription, you probably would still be making more money, but it would not be a long-term play. And unless you're trying to absolutely kill this thing, you probably would just keep it at $30. So it gives me a little bit more faith. It gives me a little bit more hope that Asha is going to make better choices. She's going to make consumer choices, and she's going to make choices that maybe, just maybe, will actually keep Xbox alive for the future. But this is a very early development for Asha. It's probably she hasn't done anything yet either, so that's something to certainly consider as well. So we'll see. It is at least a glimmer of hope for Xbox and their new leader, Miss Asha Sharma. So that will be all for the news. A little bit lighter than what we're used to over the past several weeks. Past several weeks have been like, oh my gosh, like I have so much to talk about. This huge bomb just dropped, and I've gotten so used to that. Now I'm like, oh well, I'm already done. It's only an hour into the podcast. It's only an hour into the podcast, and I'm done with news, and like it was all just like 4 small stories. It's like, oh, that's pleasant. Isn't that lovely? But enough about all that news junk. How about some gaming impressions? Well, I did mention earlier that I've been fairly busy. I have had heat exhaustion and all that other good stuff, building a deck, and all the other mini trappings of life that tend to get in the way of a good video game session. But I did have time for a short one, and that was Sonic X Shadow Generations. This is a combo game that contains both Sonic Generations and Shadow Generations, which is the new thing here. Shadow Generation or Sonic Generations was something that came out a long time ago, over a decade ago, almost a decade and a half ago, I think. It's a culmination of all of Sonic's stages from different games, the kind of the highlights, you would say, and it is one of my favorite Sonic games, if not my favorite Sonic game. I have a long and colored history with the Sonic franchise. Sonic Adventure was actually the first game I ever had as a kid. I fell in love with it, have a huge nostalgic connection to Sonic the Hedgehog. However, as any Sonic the Hedgehog fan will likely tell you, the series is known for being quite all over the place in terms of its quality of releases. Frontiers was the most recent one that came out, and it was like an open world Sonic game, and it felt like they kind of slapped it together and really didn't. It was a proof of concept, and even then, I think the developers acknowledged that, but it was a half-made game. And you'd think one of the biggest gaming IP in the world, with a big franchise of movies that are very successful and all of that jazz, would be Well, you think they would put more money and time and effort into it, but they typically don't. Most Sonic games do not. So, in terms of Sonic Generations for this collection, you could say, this update to Sonic Generations, it's basically the exact same thing with a few minor tweaks. Specifically, there's a few more collectibles in terms of chows or KOs. I don't know. I've always said chows, but they were introduced in Sonic Adventure 1 where the main villain was Chaos. So I've always said chows. Maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? There's a few hidden in every stage. So essentially now, if you had mastered Sonic Generations for whatever reason, you can now go back through and find a few more collectibles. There's already collectibles even in the base game of Sonic Generations, but in this case, you now have even more. So hope you enjoy that. So on top of that, Sonic Generations, my favorite Sonic game. It has some of the best stages and emphasizes the Sonic's franchise's best music. I have some of the tracks from this game still on my iPod. Rooftop Run is probably my favorite Sonic the Hedgehog track, the classic version. I used to like the modern version a lot. I switched to liking the classic version even more. It's a absolutely catchy tune. If you love violins, you're going to love Rooftop Run. But everything else is pretty much the same. I love the source material, love the music, love the modern Sonic stages specifically. We'll get into that in just a second. This game is very short. This playthrough for me, and this is obviously somebody who's played the game a few times already, so I kind of knew how to optimize it a little bit, but it took me about 3.5 hours to roll credits on Sonic Generations proper. This comes down to there only being like 18 stages. And when I say 18, I mean like 9. Because there's a modern Sonic stage and a classic classic Sonic stage as well. So you're basically playing the same stage twice, even though they're really different levels. Just bear with me, okay? The Sonic franchise has a modern playstyle and a classic playstyle. Classic is 2D, modern is 3D. So they technically play very differently, and the stages obviously have to be designed very differently. So even though you're playing the same themed level twice, you're really playing two completely separate stages. But overall, we'll say there's 18 because really there is. Problem with this is I absolutely freaking despise classic stages, so I freaking hate half the game. I do not like classic Sonic. I've never liked classic Sonic. Really, the draw for Sonic for me has always been speed. I love feeling like I'm on a roller coaster and I have to make like fast twitch decisions. That's really where modern Sonic thrives as a game design element, and I enjoy that personally. And I know not everybody does, but I do. Obviously, there's also probably a huge element to that being a big, like, nostalgic connection to me as a child. Classic stages, though, have way too much like stop and wait platforming, and the controls emphasize that in a way that makes it feel really clunky to jump and then make precise movements. I'm not saying that like you're not that it's easy to move as modern Sonic either. You're not super precise as modern Sonic either. But the way that it makes you have to stop and wait and then make a jump, and you're like, oh, well, I didn't get the physics right, so I have to kind of get a running start to get this jump going. And he's not very good at getting a running start because he's way slower. It's never clicked with me. I've never enjoyed it. Even like Sonic Mania, which was a game that everybody's like, "Oh, classic Sonic's back. It's the classic Sonic we've always wanted." Everyone like, it's another classic Sonic game. The fundamental problems I have with classic Sonic have not been fixed in Sonic Mania, so I'd always pretty much pass on anything classic Sonic. Generations is ultimately brought down a lot by its padding. It has various challenge levels that you have to. And by the way, this is part of the 3.5 hours that it took me to get through this game was doing the challenge levels. You are required to do challenge levels in order to progress because the game needs padding. It needs length. You can beat this game in 3 freaking hours, and you could probably beat it in probably under 2 hours if you didn't have the challenge stuff. Challenge things are clearly thrown in there as like a last ditch effort to try and add some extra content to this game to make it worth a $60 price tag, because that's what it initially sold as when it came out. And these stages are never very fun, and they're always kind of slapped together, thrown together with duct tape and bubble gum just to kind of make them work. So overall, this game, playing it now, does strike a nostalgic nerve. I played this game when it originally came out. I loved it to death, and I have a very nostalgic connection to the original Sonic Adventure. So I am very much in love with Sonic Generations. It's hard to convince me otherwise, even though I am very aware of its flaws. At least half of Sonic Generation, right? But, it's the best in the series to me. And that helps because, they doesn't have much else to compete with, because Forces and Frontiers were kind of pooped out. I wrote something different in my notes, but you understand that they are not as good at games, for sure. Now, I say all of that to say that Shadow Generations blows all of these things out of the water. I loved the Shadow Generation portions of Shadow Generations. This is interesting to me because Shadow has very little history to draw from. When they were like, oh, we're doing a Shadow Generations title, I was like, well, Shadow's only been introduced in Sonic Adventure 2. So that was the first time Shadow had ever been introduced as a character. And then after that, Shadow was really only prominently a character that you play as in 2 other Sonic games, Sonic Heroes and Sonic Heroes and Shadow the game, which is the game where they gave Shadow the Hedgehog a gun, and I think he says like curse words and stuff like that. So he doesn't have a very large catalog of games. For being this very iconic Sonic character that for some reason people really love, he really doesn't have much to pull from in terms of games in which you can redo these levels, because that's the point of Shadow. Oh my gosh, I am going to really kick myself for this. Sonic Generations is to redo a lot of the older Sonic stages. What Shadow stages do you have to pull from? You really don't have very much. Not only that, but he has no 2D at all to pull from. He's only ever been in 3D Sonic games. Well, guess who hates classic 2D Sonic stages? This guy. So I don't have to worry about playing that bull crap as Shadow. So I love that. That's perfect for me. I now have the 50% of Sonic Generations that I despised completely taken out of Shadow Generations, so I can just focus on the actual kind of gameplay that I liked. Perfect. So, all of these stages are kind of very modern Sonic aesthetic. They do a really good job of capturing that roller coaster mentality that I am so fond of. Again, if you're not a fan of that, it's very subjective, but to me, I'm a big fan of that. So I enjoyed it immensely. Not only that, but it actually felt like someone cared about making this game. A lot of levels have a cool set piece moment, which is well produced and interesting, which I am not used to for basically any Sonic game, because it's been so long since a major Sonic game has had any kind of effort really put into it and was like any kind of critical darling in any way. The game also has like an optional opening animatic, which is really well done and has like good production value behind it. It's fairly meaty and it's genuinely entertaining to watch, and it has like good action and gives you good insight to a lot of the characters, because a lot of Shadow's story is rooted in story that's not very necessary, I guess, to the general Sonic lore, and a lot of it gets completely thrown out the window very quickly. Specifically, like, did you know that Sonic, or not Sonic, Shadow is an alien? Yeah, he is. He's an alien. So Sonic the Hedgehog is not. He's a hedgehog, just purebred hedgehog from Earth, whatever. I don't know. The movies would dictate otherwise, but he's pretty much just a normal hedgehog. Shadow is an alien. He is bred from alien DNA, and that's why he is so cool. And that is obviously something that the series did during like the Dreamcast era, in which they clearly had no idea where to go with the franchise. But like that's why it's really hard to do something like this with Shadow, because he has so much baggage. His story makes so little sense in comparison to the rest of the Sonic franchise, where it's just freaking like Charmy the Bee and Miles Tails Prower freaking spinning around and, collecting rings and stuff. And then you have this guy who's literally like worked alongside the president of the United States of America to fight an alien invasion and is half alien. Like, what the frick? Like, oh, how did we get here? Well, it actually does not shy away from that at all. Which is crazy to me. How insane is that they're like, no, we cannot turn away from the crazy bull crap that we have had Shadow do over the many years of this franchise. So, like, they openly, fully acknowledge that. They fully dive into it. They honestly do a very good job, given how crazy it is and how this series is in general, to working that into the story and treating it pretty like respectfully, which is kind of crazy to me as somebody who does not care about that stuff. Like, it's kind of crazy that they ever even tried. And the fact that normal Sonic can't handle his own lore being way less convoluted and way less out there and crazy, it's kind of interesting to see that this is how, like, clearly whoever directed this, they need to give way more power in Sega over Sonic, because he figured out what the frick to do with this mess that he had been given. Not only that, but the story within the game does a good job of giving like the alternate perspective of Shadow during the like Sonic campaign for Sonic Generations. They kind of touch on some characters that should have probably been there and acknowledged but weren't in the original Sonic campaign. So specifically like Big the Cat, classic Sonic character that everybody kind of knows and loves, and then Gamma, like he's also in Shadow's campaign, which makes a lot of sense, because he's kind of considered part of the villain crew. But those two characters aren't recognized at all in the base Sonic Generations game, but in Shadows they are. They also have a reference to the Sonic and Shadow boss fight that occurs within the original game, but you don't get to play it. But at least, again, they kind of try to tie it into the overall story here, which I think is kind of crazy and like good for them, man. That's kind of really impressive that they were able to do that. And back to the original game, or the base game, not the base game. That's incorrect because now I'm confusing you, right? Back to the gameplay for Shadow Generations. They give you new powers as you progress. So, obviously in Sonic Generations, you just have a base skill set, and that's pretty much it for the main game. Shadow Generations, they give you new powers as you progress. So you are constantly being fed new things and new incentives to like interact with the world and grow your kit and stuff like that. There's progression, like, which is crazy. I am not used to saying that in a Sonic game at all. So you have these new powers. Not only can you use these powers in levels, but you can use them through the overworld as well. So the overworld is like an open world that kind of grows as you progress throughout the campaign, and it's very Sonic Frontiers. Here's the thing. Sonic Frontiers sucks balls. The open world mechanics in Sonic Frontiers is just like random bullcrap that's thrown all over the place. It's not cohesive. It does not feel thematic within the world at all. And In this, I find it genuinely fun to explore. I felt like things in this world were fun to collect, even though not a lot of it was like super necessary to collect. I still found it fun to platform and move around and collect things, and it proves that Sonic Frontiers did not have to be jank and awkward. Like, they successfully pulled off a Sonic open world game with Shadow Generations. And it's so sad that this is like a bite-sized game that really got way more polish and professionalism and goody than the main freaking franchise did. That makes no sense. This feels like it is like Sonic Frontiers definitely feels like a proof of concept. Shadow Generations feels like it's actually the final product. But it's this like kind of off the cuff, secondary, kind of expansion to a really old game kind of deal that doesn't feel very grandiose. But I'm over here like, this is genuinely the best the Sonic franchise has been in years. In decades, perhaps. You could genuinely make the argument. And it's kind of crazy that I don't hear more people talking about how good the Shadow expansion is for Sonic Generations. Overall, I feel like this feels like the first Sonic game in a really long time to actually know what it wants to be. And it has a really decent head on its shoulders. Like, if every game in the Sonic franchise was anywhere near as good as Shadow Generations, it would not be one of the biggest laughing stocks in the gaming industry. You wouldn't have people talking about Sonic 06 over and over and over and over again, or dang, like, I can't believe Sonic fans keep eating this bull crap up. I feel like a Pokemon fan buying any Sonic related title, because it's like, bro, these guys just eat up anything Nintendo pumps out. It does not matter how broken it is. It does not matter how unfun it is. It's just the fact that it's a nostalgic connection to their past. They're just going to freaking lap it up like a pig in swill, pig in mud, whatever the southern X, inner X metaphor here from the South, kind of deal. But this is good. This is good. And it gives me some kind of hope that the next Sonic game will be good, because obviously the next Sonic game is going to be Sonic Frontiers 2. Or whatever the case, the naming convention they decide to go with is. It'll be the next Sonic Frontiers game. The open world aesthetic kind of deal, which I do think Sonic needs to progress to. But what this shows me is they've already kind of figured out how to do it. And I want to see them really follow through with that in a full game, in a game in which they actually care about the story, a game where they care about the gameplay, a game where they care about the open world, a game where they have progression, where they have mechanics, where all this stuff can be a cohesive whole. And Shadow Generations proves that that is possible. And it's kind of insane to me that Shadow Generations is the first game I've said that in like over a decade. Every other Sonic game I've ever played up until now, I've been like, oh man, like, I am so sorry that I'm nostalgic for this. Like, that's kind of been the vibes I've been getting from Sonic, of anything modern Sonic, for a very, very long time. It's like, oh dang. Yeah, I really messed up being nostalgic for this. Can't believe I liked this as a kid. Yeesh. Anyway, it's disappointing, but at the same time, very nice to know that Sonic Team can pull off something. I don't know if Sonic Generations was even good, like considered successful, to be quite honest. I genuinely don't know. This was a series that, or not a series, this was a game that was really heavily discounted very quickly. I did not see a long tail on conversation for this game, so it's very surprising to me to not see that many people talk about it. I also think the marketing behind it was a little weird. Like, I didn't know if it was a Sonic expansion for a 10, 15-year-old game, or if it was a totally new game or something like that. I don't know. Marketing wasn't super well done on it either. So it's all over the place for this. But I think that they ultimately stuck the landing. I genuinely wish they had made a full game. I know it would be very difficult given that the concept of this is like, well, this is the best of for stages of this character. And this character has only been in 3 games and was not even the primary focus of most of those games that he was in. So I get it. Okay. I understand why they had to do it. But at that point, I really wish just make your own, make a shadow game. Just make it a shadow game like on its own, and that would be enough for me. I genuinely want to go back and replay this right now because I've just talking about it stirs that up within me. Genuinely enjoyed my time with this game that much. Again, I am a pretty significantly invested Sonic player, and I know how bad that sounds, but I'm willing to ride the wave of the autism that comes with it. I understand, but like I genuinely do recommend it. If you have ever enjoyed a modern Sonic game, you definitely need to give it a try. If you have not ever enjoyed a modern Sonic game, you may think this game is a hot pile of garbage still. But I didn't think that. So, that will be the end of the impressions for the episode and the end of the episode. So, only an hour and a half? Wow. The past couple of episodes have gone over 2 hours. I am always exhausted at the end of those episodes. And they're always heavy research episodes, too. Big, heavy, clunky topics. The topics I had in this one were smooth, they were quick, they were snappy. I was happy with this episode. This episode was a nice treat. After a long day's work, it was a nice treat to not have to overexert myself with this episode. You know, it's almost comical to say that, right? Like, oh man, podcasting is so hard. I just can't podcast anymore, mommy. It's too hard a job. You know, I always look at streamers and stuff and I'm like, these babies, they don't know what it's like to work a day in their lives. These losers saying that their jobs are hard. I honestly, after starting this podcast and like, I mean, I do other stuff other than podcast, obviously, but I feel pretty tired after a lot of episodes. I'm like, dang, I'm kind of spent. I'm like, dang. No wonder these people say that streaming is hard. I have a newfound respect for the podcasting grind. It may just be my personality, you know. Maybe I'm that much of an introvert kind of guy. But regardless, I am very glad that you chose to spend your time with me, Henry, the host of Plug in Play podcast. And I really do appreciate you sticking around, friend. Can I call you a friend? Are we friends in real life? Only you can decide. I guess friendship is a mutual thing, so I guess we both have to decide that. Drop a comment below if you're my real friend, and then I'll comment if I like you or not. And then we can be legit. It can be legit. So, again, I hope you are having a good day. Hope you're having a good life. Hope you're playing some good video games. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.